So Putin has promised retribution. We know it's coming. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And in the meantime, Ukraine just continues to counterpunch. And as much and as quickly as it can, it's doing its job to disable Russia's ability to strike at it. Okay, let's look at this. Alexander Dugin. We'll start here. Retaliation announced by Putin. No one knows what it'll be, but it cannot be canceled or stay unfulfilled. No way. So we'll see. Soon, I guess. Well, we don't know exactly when. It wasn't last night, but it's been promised and it looks like it's on its way. Okay, this is the U.S. State Department travel advisory. There is currently a continued risk of significant air attacks. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv urges U.S. citizens to exercise appropriate caution. You see that in the thumbnail here. That's where I got that from. Okay, President Trump said that Putin warned him that he would, quote, have to respond, unquote. Well, Russia was pantsed on the world stage before, like everyone, with that air base, the air bases being struck and 1/3 of its bombers being attacked. To the attack on Russian airfields, he did not voice any disapproval of Putin's actions in his post or warn about any U.S. reactions in that case. Now, we don't know what was going on in that conversation, so you can only speculate, and speculation isn't really very useful. Whether he said something or didn't say something, he didn't say it in that Truth Social post. The U.S. Embassy in Ukraine also warns about possible massive Russian attacks in the near future. So I'm not making up this idea that Russia wants to retaliate in a massive way. Putin references peace talks, calls Ukraine tease. You know what I'm saying when I say tea. I'm not saying that for YouTube. Vladimir Putin publicly shut the door on any peace negotiations, but with Ukraine again, he's not going to entertain any more peace negotiations. So it looks like that attack has given Russia the rationale to say, see, we just can't do anything with them. They're not interested in peace. But what's fascinating is that Russia was going to do the same thing to Ukraine with a big display the night before, and they just got beaten to the punch. In his statement, he accused Kyiv of tea, but carefully avoided even a word about Bucha or Izium or Kherson or Liman or Mariupol. And I think that when Mariupol is actually liberated, we'll find out just how egregious the Russians have been. It's going to be like finding out that the Nazis were doing what they were doing to the Jews. They're going to see horrific war crimes in the 21st century. By painting Ukraine as the aggressor while ignoring the massacres committed by his own army, Putin continues his propaganda campaign, rewriting reality while silencing justice. I think that's fair commentary. Okay, this is an image of a Mi-24V Hind helicopter gunship shooting down a Russian Shahed attack drone with a burst from its Yak-B 12.7mm Gatling gun. Here is one of the bursts, and you can see a little bit going toward it. And here's the drone. That's the before, and that's the after. Look again. That's the before. Here's it's going toward that drone. That's the before, and that's the after. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Massive Ukrainian UAV attack is underway. This was last night. Lots of drones are reported on Russian territory already. Again, the Russians are threatening, and Ukrainians just keep counterpunching in spite of the threats. In Melitopol, there are power outages reported. In Rostov, explosions are heard as air defense is engaging the drones. So destruction of position in the Kursk region by AASM hammer-guided bombs. This is the after effect of a building. This was the before, and there's the after. Okay. Ukraine destroyed an Iscander missile launchers on Russian territory for the first time. That's good, because those missiles were headed toward Ukraine more than likely. They were, they're pulled out from cover and they're on their way to shoot at Ukraine. In the Bryansk region, this is the same image. Bryansk region, an Iscander ballistic missile system already loaded with missiles intended for an attack on Kyiv was struck, according to the general staff. This is the kind of thing it looks like, by the way, right? Iskanders have been used heavily to target northern Ukraine, including Kyiv. The destruction comes as Russia postures for a massive strike on Ukraine after the SPU's major raid on Russian bombers last weekend. Okay, Ukraine also hits Milarovo airbase, cripples energy in occupied south. Drones attacked, plunged occupied Ukrainian territories into darkness, complicating Russia's plans to reactivate the occupied Zaporizhzhia power station. And this is what it looks like if you like these dots on here. These are like air defense going up to try to knock down the drones. That's what you're seeing here. All you're seeing is air defense. Yep. Okay. Over the past 24 hours, Ukrainian forces targeted several key sites in Russia's Voronezh and Rostov regions. There are also reports of an explosion on a railway line in Voronezh region. Blast occurred at the 725th kilometer of the Yedavoko-Saguni section. I don't know what that means or where it is exactly, but yeah, Ukraine just keeps counterpunching. Now, people who call it escalation, there are people that are saying, hey, Ukraine keeps escalating. They just don't want peace. They're escalating the war. People are calling it escalation when Ukrainian drones hit legitimate military targets in Russia. Never mentioned that Russian drones are deliberately hunting Ukrainian civilians. Russian bombers apparently deserve protection more than Ukrainian people. That would be the conclusion that you would draw. Okay, after the successful, this is the guy that does Vantic Soup. He said after the successful SBU operation on Russian soil, there's a high likelihood of escalation from the Russian side. In the worst case scenario, Russia might even launch a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Well, I mean, you know, but there is more to it than that. There is a risk of something, maybe even nuclear. Russia is talking about that, but with nuclear, the threat is worse than well, it's not worse, but the threat is what you really want. You want the deterrence of the threat. You don't actually want to have to employ it. You can overplay your hand. People talk a lot about the risk of Ukraine if Russia retaliates against them, but ignores the risk on Russia should Russia retaliate. Remember, this is like game theory, right? You get to play a hand and then the other side gets to play a hand, and the world can judge this. Giving Ukraine the green light to begin full-scale assassination campaigns and whatnot is something Russia should fear. And it's not just that. It's like, what else are you going to hit with? This is like, for instance, the Orishniks, right? Remember seeing the Orishniks coming down? This is from Reuters. And the Orishnik is this missile. It has multiple warheads on it, and it'll be launched. It goes up into space and then comes down at them and launch, and then, yeah. Okay, so what happens if the Orishnik missile is fired at them and then they do some really significant damage? Will the world, or a small nuke or something along those lines, will the world have an outcry, or will they just go, you know what, we're not going to go to war. We're not having nuclear war over Ukraine. It's yet to be determined what's going to happen here, but it's possible that Russia could play its hand in attacking Ukraine. Meanwhile, 200,000 Russian casualties have just passed that number since the beginning of January this year. Like, since the beginning of January this year, just think about that. Now we're at 992,750. That means in 1 week's time, we'll be to 1 million Russian casualties since the war began. On the night of June 5th, Russia launched 103 attack drones and ballistic missiles targeting Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Odesa regions. Ukrainian defenses down 74, 28 shot down, 46 jammed. Strikes hit 16 locations. So the Russians were doing what the Russians were doing, right? I mean, they just keep doing this same kind of stuff. This is some before and after the Russians decided to liberate Kherson. Yeah. And then we see more of that same kind of image. We see this. The Russians struck Kherson Oblast administration with 3 gliding bombs. This is what the regional state administration building looks like now. And we know that they were targeting Kharkiv as well last night. So-called revenge. Russia deliberately targeted residential apartment buildings in Kharkiv last night using Shahed drones. 13 civilians were injured, including 2 children. Again, another view of that same thing. On the battlefield, let's look at across direction. Only 34 attacks. That's a very light number of attacks, given what has been going on. The situation in the Kursk-Sumy front line is that Russians have gained a few villages north of Sumy, but they haven't broken through the lines yet. like that may happen. It's possible, but they're not there. They've taken like real estate there's nothing around. Ukrainians, on the other hand, keep pressure on the area that they've taken in Kursk. And according to channels, and the Russian units in this town are virtually encircled. So they're making some progress in Kursk, where the Russians aren't really taking the territory that you would think that they would be taking. Or, I mean, they're taking some like farms. I mean, there's nothing really to see there. Okay, Ukraine seeks urgent support to boost air defense after Trump says peace is not imminent. Peace is not imminent. It's not. It's really not. And I don't know why you would keep talking as if in 2 weeks I'll know whether it is. It just isn't. So what are the Russians doing to bolster themselves? Well, Russian Coast Guard sailors are now being sent to Ukraine to serve as stormtroopers, according to relatives of the men. It's unclear whether this is a new policy to make up for manpower shortages or is being done to punish the individual men in question, but that's happening. They're also taking like students that were in Russia. He gave me some documents and then explained that I wanted to serve in the army. I had the opportunity to. This time he didn't talk about the army, but said that if I didn't want to carry a weapon, I could stay and just be a cook. And he said that at the end of each month, I'd be paid 800,000 rubles. That's like $5,000 and change. But everything changed the day that they told me to get in the car. And that day we left for Luhansk, and they gave us weapons and grenades and helmets. Yeah, we started to see dead people. Yeah, like they're just tricking guys like, hey, you want to serve? Oh, you can just be a cook. You'll make all this money. And then they get shipped off to the front lines. Okay, just a couple last things to wrap up. French pilots of Mirage 2000 have made a demonstration flight over the Black Sea, drawing the Ukrainian Trident. The route was clearly visible on flight radar. That's what they did. That's kind of cool. And then finally, I'll leave you with this. This is a bird's nest. But look at that bird's nest. It's a little different. Birds on the front lines weave their nests from fiber optics. You got to wonder what's going on in the bird's mind. Is he like, score, this is the longest twig ever? Or is he just going like, man, this thing just keeps going on, and how long is this going to take? Anyway, thought I'd end with something uplifting. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.